I still remember the smell of polish and sweat the day I arrived at the academy. It hit like a warning. Everything here gleamed. The floors, the badges, even the air seemed scrubbed clean of softness. The moment the gates closed behind me, the world I knew was gone. Pride pulsed in my chest, but so did fear. I told myself it was only training, that I could endure anything for a uniform and a badge. I didn't yet understand that the hardest part wasn't the drills. It was the people who enforced them. The morning lineup stretched across the courtyard like a parade of identical faces. Rows of new recruits, boots shining, back straight, hearts pounding. My shirt clung to my spine, soaked through before the first whistle. The instructors barked orders, their voices echoing off the concrete walls, and we snapped into formation like marionettes pulled by the same invisible string. Then he appeared, Captain Marcus Hale. He walked out from the administration building as if the world made space for him. Mid-30s, tall, expression unreadable. His stride measured, his presence magnetic in a way that demanded silence. The chatter around me stopped mid-sentence. His uniform looked somehow sharper than ours, the creases cutting like blades. Even the sunlight seemed careful with him. "Good morning, cadets." His voice carried authority without needing volume. It wasn't a shout. It was the calm certainty that everyone would listen. We did. He spoke about honor, integrity, obedience. The words were carved in stone, rehearsed and unyielding. Yet when he looked at us, it felt personal, like he could already see who would make it and who would break. When his gaze swept across the line, it landed on me for a fraction too long. I straightened instinctively, then hated myself for reacting. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it wasn't. The inspection began. Step by step, Captain Hale moved down the row, eyes sharp, gloved hands adjusting collars, fixing postures, cutting down anyone who wasn't perfect. My pulse hammered as he approached. I polished my belt twice, checked my buttons 3 times. Still, when he stopped in front of me, I knew something was wrong. "Cadet Walker." His tone was level, but his eyes were knives. "What is this?" I followed his gaze. The left flap of my pocket hadn't been buttoned. Tiny thing. Stupid, careless. Sir, I must have. He cut me off. "You must have remembered the uniform code before stepping onto my courtyard." The recruits around me froze. I felt their silence like a weight. My throat tightened, but pride clawed at me to say something. "It won't happen again, sir. It shouldn't have happened the first time." He took a step closer, close enough that I could see a faint scar above his brow, a thin, pale line that somehow made him seem even more composed. "Attention to detail is what keeps you alive out there, cadet. Out here, it keeps you in my program." Then he leaned in, so quietly only I could hear, "Fix it, now." I fumbled with the button, fingers clumsy. When it clicked shut, he stepped back, nodded once, and moved to the next recruit. No shouting, no theatrics. Just a simple correction that burned hotter than a public humiliation. Because it was both. My cheeks felt on fire. I stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, pretending I didn't feel every eye on me. I hated him in that moment. Hated how calm he stayed, how easily he made me small. I didn't join to be someone's puppet. The rest of the inspection blurred into a rhythm of boots, orders, and the crack of discipline. Every "yes, sir" sounded identical, like the academy was designed to erase individuality. But beneath the uniformity, my mind replayed the briefest flicker of his expression. Something unreadable that flashed in his eyes as he moved away from me. Not satisfaction, not anger, something else. A recognition, maybe, or curiosity. After the drill, we were dismissed to the mess hall. Recruits laughed nervously, already forming alliances of convenience. I sat alone with my tray, picking at eggs gone cold, trying to shake off the humiliation. Across the hall, Hale entered with 2 other instructors. The room shifted, conversation thinning to murmurs. He didn't look in my direction, didn't need to. His presence filled the space like pressure. I caught myself watching him anyway, tracing how he moved, the precision of each gesture, the way others unconsciously mirrored him. There was power in that kind of control. And danger. Later that afternoon, we ran endurance laps in the blistering sun. Sweat stung my eyes, lungs seared. Halfway through, I stumbled, barely keeping balance. From the sidelines, Hale's voice cut through the whistle shrieks. "Walker, you planning to crawl your way to the badge?" The recruits snickered. I forced my legs to move faster, fueled by anger more than stamina. When I crossed the line, I met his gaze for the briefest second. He didn't smile, didn't scold, just gave a curt nod. Somehow, that felt worse than mockery. Days bled together. Wake-up call at 0500, inspection, drills, lectures. I kept my head down, my uniform flawless. Yet every time Hale entered the room, I felt a current run through me. Something sharp, restless, impossible to name. His voice carried across the parade ground, and part of me wanted to ignore it, to resist. Another part wanted to prove I could match it. One evening, after lights out, I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling, the rhythm of footsteps echoing faintly from outside, probably instructors doing rounds. Still, I knew that gait before I even looked, the deliberate cadence that belonged only to him. He stopped near our dorm window, murmured something to another officer, and moved on. I told myself it was nothing, yet I kept listening until the sound faded completely. The next morning, during weapons assembly, I caught his reflection in the mirror of the range. He was watching us train, arms crossed, eyes focused, except when they weren't. For a heartbeat, I was sure he looked directly at me. The same unreadable gaze as before. Not soft, not stern, simply aware. It unsettled me more than any reprimand. By the time evening fell, I couldn't tell whether I admired him or despised him. Maybe both. He was everything the Academy wanted us to become. Composed, relentless, untouchable. And I, hot-headed, unpolished, still clinging to fragments of individuality, stood at the opposite end of that spectrum. But when I passed him later that day in the corridor, a faint scent of leather and soap lingered as he brushed by. He said nothing, only nodded once in acknowledgement. Still, the sound of my own name in his voice, Walker, seemed to echo longer than it should have. That night, lying awake again, I replayed that moment until exhaustion took over. It was nothing, just protocol, just formality. And yet, somewhere in the quiet, a thought I didn't want crept in. That was the first time he said my name, and it stayed in my head all night. By the second week, the Academy had stripped us down to muscle and bone. The mornings came earlier, the nights shorter. Sleep became a rumor. The whistle blew at 4:45 a.m., and within minutes we were lined up in formation. Same boots, same breath, same exhaustion pretending to be discipline. Every day felt like a test I didn't remember signing up for. And every day it was Captain Marcus Hale who seemed determined to make me fail. He never raised his voice, but somehow his words hit harder than any shout. "Walker, your stance is lazy. Walker, your timing's off. Walker again. Always my name. Always precise. Always in front of everyone." At first, I thought he was targeting me out of spite. I was vocal during training, not disrespectful but not robotic either. I asked questions when I wasn't supposed to. I wanted to understand the why behind every order, and he wanted me to stop asking. It was oil and fire from the beginning. By the third week, the whispers had started. "Captain Hale's got it out for you, man." One of the recruits, Daniels, muttered as we wiped sweat off our faces after drills. "He does that to everyone," I said. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. "Nah," Daniels smirked. "He's worse with you. Maybe you remind him of someone he doesn't like, or someone he couldn't ignore." I shook the thought off, tightened my laces, and jogged back onto the field. But the words lingered. Marcus's standards were impossible. He noticed everything. The crease of a sleeve, the flicker of hesitation before a salute, the faintest uneven breath during the obstacle course. Perfection wasn't enough. He demanded purpose. And the harder he pushed, the more I wanted to prove him wrong. That became my quiet rebellion. Not backtalk, just excellence. If he wanted to break me, I'd make it difficult. One afternoon, we ran the confidence course, rope climbs, mud trenches, barbed wire. The air was thick with humidity, uniforms soaked through. Marcus stood on the sidelines with his clipboard, eyes following every move. When I slipped during the wall climb, my palms scraping against the rough wood, I heard his voice like a blade through fog. "Walker, you're losing focus." Something inside me snapped. I didn't look at him. I just jumped again, caught the ledge, and hauled myself over. My muscles screamed, but I didn't stop. When I landed on the other side, his tone softened, almost imperceptibly. "That's better." 2 words. No applause, no smile. But for some reason, I carried them with me all day like a medal. That night, as we collapsed into our bunks, the barracks hummed with exhaustion. Most recruits were already asleep when an instructor entered, calling my name. "Walker, duty assignment. Report to the training yard." It was 2,200 hours. My body begged for rest, but orders were orders. I threw on my jacket and stepped into the night. The floodlights bathed the empty field in pale white. And there he was, Captain Hale, standing near the storage shed, clipboard in hand. His uniform jacket was off, sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted with chalk from the training equipment. "Sir," I said, keeping my voice neutral. He didn't look up. "We've got equipment to secure before the storm hits. You'll assist." We worked in silence for a long time, hauling cones, stacking barricades, dragging heavy mats across the gravel. The floodlights buzzed faintly above us, and crickets chirped somewhere beyond the fence. The air smelled like rain and dust. Every time I passed him, I caught faint glimpses, the curve of his jaw in the light, the line of concentration on his face. There was something almost human about him in the quiet, stripped of the whistle and the command tone. Just a man doing work beside another man. At one point, I struggled to hoist a weight bar back onto the rack. Without a word, he came up behind me, his hands steadying the metal. His voice low, almost near my ear. "Lift with your legs, not your back." I froze for a second, not because of the touch, but because of how steady it felt. Controlled. Intentional. He didn't move closer, didn't linger. He guided the motion, then stepped back, as though nothing had happened. But the warmth of his hand stayed like a brand through the fabric of my sleeve. When I finally set the bar down, I exhaled sharply. "Thank you, sir." He nodded once. "You learn fast when you stop fighting everything." It wasn't criticism, not exactly. More like observation. We went back to work, neither of us speaking again. The silence stretched, not awkward but charged. Every scrape of metal, every breath seemed amplified. When the last piece was stored, Marcus clicked his clipboard shut and turned toward me. "You did well tonight," he said quietly. I hesitated. "Even with the lifting form error?" A flicker of a smile. "Especially with that. You corrected it. That's what matters." The compliment shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Too much. I caught myself watching his face in the glow of the lights, the subtle creases near his eyes, the faint stubble on his jaw, the way fatigue softened the strict edges of his expression. I looked away quickly, pretending to check the equipment locks. When we finally left the field, the storm had started, soft rain turning the gravel to sheen. We walked toward the barracks, side by side, the only sounds the tap of boots and the patter of water. He spoke without looking at me. "Walker, do you know why I push you harder than the others?" I tightened my jaw. "Because you think I'm careless, sir." He shook his head once, slow. "Because you care too much, and that kind of man either becomes the best officer here, or he burns out before graduation." I didn't know what to say to that. He stopped walking, turned to face me. The floodlights from behind haloed him in white. "Don't let pride ruin potential," he said softly. "You can be both strong and teachable. Don't confuse obedience with weakness." His words lingered as thunder rolled in the distance. Then he dismissed me with a simple nod, leaving me standing in the rain. Back in my bunk, I couldn't sleep. His words looped over and over. I told myself it was frustration, that I was just tired of his games. But somewhere deeper, I felt something else, something that scared me more than failure. Why did his approval matter to me? I'd spent my whole life resisting control, teachers, parents, anyone who tried to tell me who to be. But when he spoke, I listened. When he watched, I wanted to do better. It wasn't logic. It was instinct. And it unsettled me. The next morning, during roll call, I caught him looking at me again across the field. Just a glance, impassive, unreadable, before he turned away to address the group. But I saw something in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. Not disapproval. Not even interest. Something quieter. Recognition, maybe. A kind of shared fatigue. That afternoon, during sparring practice, he called me out again. "Walker, step up." I squared off against another recruit. We grappled, twisted, hit the mat. Marcus's voice guided the movement. Sharp, focused. When I made a clean takedown, he nodded once. But when I slipped during the counter, he stopped the exercise immediately. "Walker, front and center." I bit my tongue to stop from cursing. I stood at attention as he approached, his eyes scanning my form. "Your stance is wide. You leave your balance open." I exhaled, frustrated. "Sir, with respect, no one else has to redo it 5 times. He met my glare with a calm that made me feel like a child again. "Do you want me to treat you like everyone else?" "Yes, sir," I snapped. He stepped closer, voice lowering so only I could hear. "Then stop standing out." I froze. There was no anger in his tone, only quiet intensity. Then he added, almost gently, "I push you because I see something in you. Something that deserves more than average." The words hit harder than any order. My throat felt dry. I didn't know what to do with the way he said it. Like it wasn't about training anymore. Like he was speaking to a part of me I didn't show anyone. He turned away before I could reply. Back to formation. The session ended. I stood there, pulse hammering, the world spinning around his words. I'd come here to build a career, to prove I could stand on my own. But now, with every command, every glance, he was rewriting the meaning of strength itself. And for the first time, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to resist him or understand him. The academy wasn't supposed to have favorites. That was drilled into us from day one: impartiality, fairness, the illusion that everyone stood equal in the eyes of authority. But somewhere between week 6 and week 8, I realized that equality didn't survive long under Captain Hale's shadow. He started calling me in for extra training. At first, it sounded like punishment. My classmates teased me about it, whispering that I must have done something wrong again. I didn't correct them. It was easier to let them believe that than admit the truth, that Hale had personally requested me. The sessions were always late, the parade ground empty, the night air thick with dew and exhaustion. He'd meet me at the obstacle course or the shooting range, clipboard in hand, as if the academy itself were watching. "You need precision, not just strength," he said one night, correcting my grip on the service weapon. His voice stayed calm, deliberate. "A good officer hits what he aims for. A great one knows why he's aiming." He stood behind me, adjusting my stance. The space between us felt charged. Not inappropriate, just too aware. His breath brushed my neck as he leaned closer, guiding the line of my arms. "Right there," he murmured. "Now exhale." The shot cracked through the still air. Perfect center. When I turned, his expression didn't change. No smile, no praise, just that subtle flicker in his eyes again, like approval disguised as restraint. I told myself it was respect. It had to be. But the whispers grew louder. "Private coaching, huh?" Daniel said one morning as we scrubbed the mess hall floors. "Guess Captain Hale likes you more than he lets on." I shot him a look. "He likes discipline. That's it." "Sure," he grinned, elbowing me. "And I like running 5 miles before breakfast." The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. Hale was giving me more than others: attention, time, trust. And I couldn't tell if I'd earned it or if I was being tested in some way I didn't understand. That confusion followed me everywhere. Every look from him became a question I couldn't answer. The rain started without warning during the Thursday night drill. Sheets of water slashed across the field, turning the dirt to mud. We were ordered to continue. It was weather endurance, Hale said. The sky growled overhead as we crawled through the trenches, uniforms soaked, breath ragged. Lightning flashed, followed by thunder that rattled the ground. Somewhere ahead, Hale's voice cut through the chaos. "Move, recruits. Real storms don't wait for your comfort." I kept pushing forward, mud caked to my elbows, until the whistle finally blew for end of exercise. The others stumbled toward the barracks, dripping and exhausted. I stayed behind to gather equipment, orders again, of course. By the time I reached the training shed, the rain had turned brutal. Hale was already there, stacking helmets and checking gear, water streaming down his face and collar. He looked at me and frowned. "Walker, you'll catch pneumonia standing there." "I was told to finish the cleanup, sir." He sighed, stepped forward, and without a word, shrugged off his jacket. The heavy academy one, still warm beneath the soaked outer layer, and draped it over my shoulders. For a moment I froze. The fabric carried his scent. Faint cologne, leather, rain. It was stupid how much it affected me. "I can't," I started. "Consider it an order," he said quietly. "You've done enough tonight." The floodlights behind him cast his face in pale gold, and for the first time, I saw something unguarded in his expression. Tired, human. He wasn't Captain Hale, the cold perfectionist. He was just Marcus, a man standing in the rain, holding the weight of too many recruits, too many rules. "You remind me of why I joined this place," he said suddenly, almost to himself. The words came out softer than the rain. I wasn't sure he even meant for me to hear. "Sir?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He blinked, as if snapping out of thought. "Forget it. Get inside before you freeze." But I didn't forget it. Couldn't. That night, while water dripped from the eaves and thunder faded into the distance, I lay awake thinking about his voice. The way he'd said, "You remind me," not "you make me proud," not "you're a good recruit." It was personal. Something buried inside that simple sentence trembled between past and present, between him and me. Days later, I started noticing details I'd missed before. Marcus during morning drills, not shouting, just observing with quiet precision. How he bent down to help a recruit tie his bootlace after a fall. How he carried an injured trainee off the course instead of waiting for medics. None of it was for show. Most instructors liked an audience. He didn't. His kindness came like a secret he didn't want anyone to notice. The more I saw him like that, the less my anger fit. The defiance that once burned in me was cooling into something else. Not obedience, but understanding. I found myself anticipating his voice, his approval, even his criticism. The same authority that once suffocated me was now the only thing keeping me centered. And that terrified me, because every time I thought I'd figured him out, he showed another piece I wasn't ready for. One afternoon, I walked into the supply hall to find a group of recruits laughing quietly. I caught the tail end of a joke. Marcus's name. Something about how he sleeps with his rulebook. I didn't know why it bothered me so much. He wasn't even there. He wouldn't have cared. But I did. "Cut it out," I said sharply. Daniels raised his eyebrows. "What's it to you?" "Show some respect," I snapped. "You wouldn't last a day doing what he does." The room went quiet. Daniels smirked, but he didn't reply. I left before I said something I'd regret. Later, I hated how defensive I'd been, as if Marcus needed me to protect him. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about him. It was about me. I couldn't stand hearing anyone reduce him to a stereotype when I'd seen what lay beneath the surface. That night, my dreams betrayed me. I dreamed of the rain again. The training yard, the floodlights, his voice calling my name. Only this time, I didn't stop at his command. I turned, stepped closer, close enough to see the water tracing down his face. He looked at me not as a superior, not as a teacher, but as someone who saw me. When I woke, my chest was tight, my sheets tangled. The dream faded quickly, but the feeling didn't. It lingered through morning drills, through breakfast, through every clipped "yes, sir," that left my mouth. I kept my head down, but every time I heard his footsteps, something inside me shifted, like gravity had chosen a new center. The academy days blurred into a rhythm of exhaustion and restraint. But something between us had changed. His corrections came softer. His eyes lingered longer. And mine searched for him even when I didn't mean to. Once, after an evening drill, he walked past me in the corridor, close enough that his sleeve brushed mine. Just a fraction of contact, but enough to make my heart stumble. Neither of us looked back. I started noticing how his hand lingered on the doorway after meetings, how his jaw tightened when other instructors mocked our class's failures. These were small cracks in the armor, glimpses of a man holding himself together under the weight of command. And somehow, I wanted to be the one who saw him when no one else did. Weeks passed. The rain came again. This time, it didn't feel like punishment. Felt like memory. During another late-night inspection, I caught him watching from the far end of the field. For once, I didn't look away. Our eyes met, brief, steady, wordless. Something silent passed between us. Not rebellion, not obedience. Something else entirely. I didn't understand it then. Maybe I didn't want to. But as I lay in my bunk later that night, staring at the ceiling while the thunder rolled in the distance, I realized something had shifted inside me. Slow and irreversible. I didn't hate him anymore. Not his orders, not his criticism, not even his silence. I hated him less each day. Maybe that was the start of everything. The academy had rules for everything, how to stand, how to speak, even how to breathe under pressure. But there were no rules for what happened when someone lied about you. It started with a drill gone wrong. Daniels missed his mark during the lift scenario exercise and blamed me. Claimed I'd given him the wrong signal. I hadn't, but in front of the review board it didn't matter. Hale was on the panel. For the first time since I'd arrived, I couldn't read him. His face gave nothing away as the instructors traded reports. My stomach twisted. If the accusation stuck, it meant disciplinary review and a permanent mark on my record. Months of work, gone. When the session adjourned, Hale dismissed everyone except me. The door closed with a solid click that sounded like a verdict. "Walker," he said quietly, "sit down." I did. My palms were damp against my knees. "I know what happened." "Sir." He raised a hand. "You don't have to explain. I was watching from the North Tower." Daniels missed his cue. "You followed protocol." The breath I'd been holding slipped out like a leak in a tire. "Then why didn't you say so in front of them?" He looked down at his hands, interlacing his fingers. "Because the moment I speak in your defense, every rumor about favoritism becomes fact. And then neither of us walks out clean." It hit me like a slap. He had been protecting me, even when it didn't look like it. Quietly, invisibly, the way he always did. Later that night, a message came through the barracks runner. "Report to Captain Hale's office at 2200. My heart sank. It wasn't an order to fear, but I knew it wasn't routine either. The corridor outside his office was dim, the hum of the vending machine the only sound. When I knocked, his voice answered from inside, lower than usual. "Come in." The office smelled faintly of paper and coffee. A single lamp cast gold light across the desk, catching the edges of files stacked in disciplined order. Hale stood by the window, uniform jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled. For once he looked tired, not just physically but bone deep. He gestured toward the empty chair. "Close the door." I did, and the silence that followed was so complete I could hear the rain starting outside. He spoke first. "You shouldn't have had to face that alone today." "It's fine, sir. It's the academy. I can take it." His jaw tightened. "That's not the point. You shouldn't have to take it." He turned away, rubbing a hand over his face. I thought by now I'd learned how to stay detached. "But you—" He stopped himself, exhaled. "You make that difficult." Something inside me shifted. All the weeks of confusion, resentment, admiration. Suddenly they were one feeling, sharp and clear. "I didn't ask for special treatment," I said quietly. "I know." He looked at me then, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "That's what makes it worse." He sank into the chair opposite mine, the veneer of command slipping. "You think it's easy leading people who look at you like you're a machine? Like you don't feel the same cold, the same weight?" I hesitated. "I never thought about it." "Of course you didn't. You're still allowed to have ideals." A humorless smile flickered across his face. I lost mine somewhere around my first funeral detail. The rain outside thickened, blurring the window. For the first time, I saw the man beneath the title. The exhaustion around his eyes, the faint tremor in his fingers when he poured coffee from the thermos. He offered me the mug. Here. It's not regulation, but it helps. I took it, our fingers brushing for half a second. The warmth of the metal cup seeped into my hands. You shouldn't risk defending me, I said. You'll make enemies. I already have plenty. He leaned back, eyes still on me. But you're not one of them. The words hung there, heavier than they should have been. I set the cup down. Then what am I? For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each second a held breath. He stood, walked around the desk, and stopped beside me. The air between us thinned. You remind me of something I used to be, he said finally. Someone who still believed this place could turn people into something better instead of grinding them down. When he put his hand on my shoulder, it wasn't dominance. It was connection, quiet, hesitant, searching. My pulse jumped. Could have moved. I didn't. He seemed to realize it at the same time I did. His thumb brushed the edge of my collar, an accident or maybe not. My breath caught. This is a mistake, he murmured. I should have agreed. Instead, I looked up. Then why does it feel like the first thing that isn't? For a heartbeat, the room stood still. Then the distance between us vanished. It wasn't a hard kiss. It was trembling, tentative, a question neither of us could voice. His hand slid to the back of my neck. Mine found the edge of his sleeve. The world narrowed to the sound of rain against glass and the taste of fear and relief sharing the same breath. He pulled back first, eyes wide, chest rising fast. Walker! I stepped back, the chair bumping into the desk. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't. He shook his head, voice rough. Don't apologize. Just don't let anyone see this. Ever. The authority returned to his face, but the mask didn't fit as well anymore. He ran a hand through his hair. If anyone finds out, we're finished. You understand that? I nodded. Words wouldn't come. My heart was still pounding like I'd sprinted a mile. He turned away, gripping the edge of the desk as if it might hold him steady. We'll forget this happened. Tomorrow we go back to normal. But even as he said it, I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe it any more than I did. I'll see myself out, I managed. Walker. I stopped at the door. His voice dropped to a whisper. Be careful. The walls have ears. I left before I could answer. The corridor outside was cold, sterile, the rain leaking faintly through a crack in the window. I leaned against the wall, pressing a hand to my chest, trying to steady the storm inside me. Every rule I'd memorized, every line drilled into my head about discipline and restraint. It all unraveled in that small room under the sound of rain. When I finally returned to the barracks, the others were asleep. The air smelled of wet uniforms and fatigue. I lay on my bunk staring at the ceiling until dawn began to pale the windows. I told myself it was nothing, that it wouldn't happen again, that it couldn't. But when I closed my eyes, I could still feel the weight of his hand on my shoulder, the way the air had changed when he looked at me. Not as his cadet, but as something dangerously human. No matter how many drills they made us run, how many codes they made us recite, discipline couldn't erase what his lips had already written. The days after that night were a blur of noise and silence. Noise because the academy never stopped, whistles, drills, shouted orders. Silence because Marcus and I had stopped speaking except when duty demanded it. He became colder in public. Clipped commands. No eye contact. No trace of what had happened in his office. At first I thought it was anger, that he regretted everything and wanted to erase it through discipline. But soon I realized it was worse. It was protection. He was building walls high enough for both of us to hide behind. The other recruits noticed the shift. They always did. Daniel started watching me the way people watch a fuse, waiting to see when it'll spark. Looks like Captain Hale's finally bored of his golden boy, he muttered one morning after inspection. I didn't answer. If I had, I might have said something reckless. Rumors spread faster than drills. Special treatment, they whispered. Private coaching. Probably sleeping his way to a badge. Every lie carried a piece of truth buried inside, the part that made me flinch. Sleep became impossible. When I did drift off, I'd wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, replaying the feel of his hand, the sound of rain against his window. The guilt sat heavy in my chest, but so did the longing. My performance slipped. I missed small details, button unfastened, hesitation in response. Things Marcus used to correct quietly. Now he did it loudly. Walker, he barked across the courtyard. You call that attention? Yes, sir. Then start acting like it. The sting wasn't in the words. It was in the distance behind them. I wanted to hate him for it, but I couldn't. Every cruel order was a shield. Every public reprimand, a way to keep suspicion away from the truth. I told myself to focus, to bury it all under the uniform. But it's hard to kill something that's already inside you. The accident happened on a Thursday endurance drills in the assault course. Rain again, as if the sky refused to leave us alone. We were halfway through the rope climb when one of the support beams snapped. Hale shouted for everyone to clear, but instinct drove me the wrong way. Instead of retreating, I went toward the noise. The beam crashed sideways. I caught a glimpse of him pushing another cadet out of the way before it hit. Then a sharp, awful sound, the kind that ends training and starts nightmares. "Captain down!" someone yelled. I didn't wait for permission. I ran. Orders blurred behind me. Mud flew under my boots as I reached him. He was half sitting against the ground, breathing hard, hand pressed to his shoulder where the wood had grazed him deep. "Sir, stay still," I said, dropping to my knees. "Walker." He tried to speak, but pain stole his breath. "Don't talk." My hands trembled as I tore my sleeve to press against the wound. Blood seeped warm between my fingers. Instructors rushed over, calling medics, shouting protocols, but all I saw was him. His face pale, jaw clenched, rain streaking down like tears he'd never admit to. When the medics lifted him onto the stretcher, he grabbed my wrist for a second. A small, desperate squeeze. Then he let go. They sent him to the base infirmary, off-limits to recruits. That rule lasted about 2 hours. By nightfall, I'd found a way past it. The corridors smelled of antiseptic and wet uniforms. I stopped outside his door, heart hammering. When I knocked lightly, his voice answered, hoarse, familiar. "Come in." He was sitting upright, left arm bandaged and supported by a sling. Even wounded, he looked composed, except for the faint surprise when he saw me. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I had to see if you were all right." "I'm fine." "You're bleeding through the bandage." He looked down, sighed. "Not the first time." I stepped closer. "You could have been killed. That's the job." "No," I said quietly. "That's you, always standing between everyone else and the damage." His gaze flicked up to mine, sharp and weary. "Someone has to." I moved to the side of the bed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The lamp hummed softly in the corner. His skin looked pale against the sheets, the veins faintly blue beneath the surface. "I'm sorry," I said finally, "for that night, for everything." He shook his head. "Don't apologize for feeling something real." The words hit like a punch. "Then why act like it never happened?" "Because it shouldn't have," he said. "Because I'm supposed to protect you, not—" I cut him off. "You don't need to protect me. I chose this too." The silence that followed felt endless. Then his shoulders loosened, the first sign of surrender I'd ever seen from him. "You have no idea how much that scares me," he whispered. I reached for his hand before I could stop myself. He didn't pull away. The bandages were rough against my skin, but his fingers curled faintly around mine. "I'm tired of being afraid," I said. He smiled barely. "That makes one of us." The room smelled of rain again. A window somewhere must have been left open. The sound filled the space between us. For the first time since the academy began, there was no rank here, no rulebook, no distance. Just two people caught in the same quiet storm. He exhaled slowly. "Walker, if anyone—" "I know," I said. If anyone finds out, we're finished. He nodded, eyes half closed, the exhaustion catching up to him. Then let's make sure it's worth the risk. I sat beside the bed until he drifted off. Watching him sleep felt almost sacred. Without the armor of command, he looked younger, softer. Someone who carried the weight of everyone else's mistakes and still found a way to stand. I thought about all the times he'd pushed me, humiliated me, tested me. Not to break me, but to see if I'd bend and return stronger. And somehow, through all the discipline and restraint, what grew between us wasn't corruption. It was compassion, dangerous, human, unplanned. When the nurse came in to check his vitals, I slipped out quietly, the sound of rain still following me down the corridor. Outside, the academy lights flickered through the storm. The courtyard looked different now, less like a cage, more like a proving ground. Maybe the lesson was never about obedience. Maybe it was about understanding what you're willing to fight for. As I walked back toward the barracks, the thunder faded behind me. I felt lighter, not because the guilt was gone, but because I finally understood it. Duty and desire weren't enemies. They were the same force, twisted in opposite directions, the need to protect something that matters. For the first time, I understood that love and duty can bleed into the same uniform. By the time winter gave way to spring, the academy no longer felt like a battlefield. The drills still started at dawn, the whistles still sliced the air, but I'd learned how to breathe inside the noise. The bruises faded. The doubts didn't, but I'd learned how to carry those too. Captain Hale Marcus returned to duty after his injury. He kept his distance, professional as ever, his expression carved from the same marble discipline as before. If anyone noticed the difference between us, they mistook it for rivalry. We played our parts perfectly. Rumors eventually died, replaced by new gossip, new recruits, new scandals. The academy always moved forward, even when its people stayed stuck in place. When graduation day came, the courtyard looked almost merciful under the late morning sun. Rows of cadets stood straight in crisp blues, medals flashing. My heart felt like a drumbeat trying to escape its cage. They called my name, Cadet Walker, top of class. Applause rose around me, a tide of sound that barely reached my ears. I stepped forward, received the badge, saluted, smiled for the cameras. But my eyes found him at the edge of the crowd, standing apart, arms crossed behind his back. The sunlight caught the faint scar near his brow. His expression was unreadable, but when our eyes met for half a second, something passed between us. Not pride, not longing, just recognition. I wanted to thank him, but some debts were too personal for ceremony. After the crowd thinned, after families left with photographs and medals, I stayed behind to help clear the gym. The air smelled of floor polish and coffee, the echo of laughter still bouncing between rafters. He found me there as I knew he would. Still cleaning up after everyone else, he said. His voice was softer than it had been in months. I turned, forcing a smile. Old habits die hard. He walked across the room, his steps measured, careful. The echo of his boots was the only sound. I put in for a transfer, he said without preamble. They're assigning me to the regional academy upstate. I nodded, even though my chest tightened. Safer that way. He looked at me for a long moment. You'll do well out there. The precinct commander already asked for your name. That's thanks to your training. He shook his head. You did the work. I just steered. Silence hung between us. The kind of silence that says more than words ever could. I thought I'd feel relieved when this was over, I admitted. But all I feel is empty. He exhaled, crossing his arms. That's how you know you cared about it. The job, the people, sometimes it takes more than it gives. I joined to serve the law, I said quietly. But I found something worth protecting even more. His eyes softened, the faintest ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. Then protect it quietly. He stepped closer, just close enough that I could feel his warmth, but not enough for the world to misinterpret it. The line we crossed, it doesn't have to define you. What you learned does. I swallowed hard. And what about you? He smiled, real this time, small and tired but genuine. I'll keep doing what I've always done. Teach people to be better than me. He reached out and straightened the edge of my collar, the same way he had on my first day. For a moment, I thought he might say something more, but instead he simply said, "Take care, Officer Walker." Not cadet, not kid, officer. I saluted him one last time. He returned it. No words, no touch, just the quiet understanding of two people who'd shared something they could never explain. When he left the gym, I didn't watch him go. Couldn't. The echo of his footsteps faded, and the emptiness that followed felt like both loss and relief. Years passed. The badge got heavier, not lighter. Every decision carried a weight that training never prepared me for. But I held to the lessons he'd taught. Precision, restraint, empathy hidden beneath command. They assigned me to city patrol first, then investigations. Nights bled into mornings. Holidays vanished under duty rosters. Sometimes, when paperwork piled high and tempers ran hot, I'd hear his voice in my head. Discipline isn't about control. It's about clarity. I never saw him again until I did. It was at a leadership conference 5 years later. Different city, different life. I was no longer a cadet. My name tag read Detective Walker, Internal Affairs. The irony wasn't lost on me. The ballroom buzzed with chatter. Officers from across the state, all in civilian suits for once. I was halfway through a lukewarm cup of coffee when I heard someone say my name. Walker. The voice froze me in place before I even turned. He was standing near the corner table, a cup in hand. No uniform, no insignia. Just Marcus. Older, the lines near his eyes deeper, the calm still intact. For a second, the years fell away. The rain, the whispers, the late-night training grounds. All of it came rushing back. "Captain Hale," I said automatically. He chuckled. "Just Marcus now. They made me retire the title when I took the teaching post." "You're teaching?" He nodded. "Basic ethics and command psychology. Figured if I couldn't stop the system from breaking people, I could at least teach them how not to break themselves." "That sounds like you." He smiled. "And you?" "Detective now, I hear." "Internal Affairs." He raised an eyebrow. "The watchdog." I should have guessed. We laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that comes from shared history rather than humor. Around us, the room kept moving. People networking, shaking hands, but it all blurred. He gestured toward the balcony. "Walk with me." Outside, the city stretched in amber light. Cars murmured below. The wind carried faint music from a nearby bar. For a while, we didn't speak. "You ever think about it?" I asked finally. He didn't look at me. "Every day I wore the uniform after that, yes." "Do you regret it?" He considered. "I regret the risk, not the truth." The answer settled between us like dust in sunlight. I nodded slowly. I used to wonder if it meant anything, or if it was just weakness. "It wasn't weakness," he said. "It was humanity. And that's the part this job tries hardest to kill." We stood there, side by side, no badges, no ranks, no lines to cross anymore. Just two men who'd lived through the same storm. After a while, he glanced at his watch. "I should head back before they start the panel." I smiled faintly. "Still punctual." "Old habits," he said, and then hesitated. "I'm glad you made it. You turned out all right, Walker." I met his gaze. "Because of you." He shook his head. "Despite me." When he turned to leave, I caught his arm. Not to stop him, just to anchor the moment. "Marcus," I said quietly. "Thank you." He nodded once, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Be safe out there, detective." Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd like he always had, quietly, without ceremony. I watched him go, a strange peace settling in the space he left behind. It had taken years, but I finally understood the lesson he'd been trying to teach since the day I arrived at the academy. Obedience and integrity aren't enemies. Neither are strength and tenderness. Sometimes the hardest part of the oath isn't keeping it. It's learning what it truly means. I thought about that as I walked back into the conference hall, the chatter swallowing me whole. My badge hung heavy against my chest, the same metal that had once separated us now reminding me of what we'd shared. He taught me to follow orders, but also to listen to my heart. Maybe the hardest lesson was learning that both can be right. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It helps us bring you more stories about love, courage, and the moments that change us forever. Tell me in the comments, do you think Marcus and Walker made the right choice to protect their secret, or should they have risked everything for love? Your thoughts might inspire the next story.